I want justice and equality for every man and woman that walks this earth. And, we have a lot of work to do. And sure, we can't get it done in a day or a week or a couple of months, but we can never stop aiming and pursuing that goal. So, like I said, those are kind of my views and my thoughts and ideas on that. And hopefully one day we will have a country that, we can all stand and be proud of at every single second and moment, and not just, cherry pick certain particular incidents. So.
Welcome to a special edition of Meeting with the Manager, hosted by Oak Park City Manager Erik Tungate. My name is Joscelyn Davis, and I serve as the Director of Communications and Public Information for the City of Oak Park. Today, we're turning the tables on the traditional Meeting with the Manager format. Usually, our City Manager Erik Tungate sits in the interviewer's chair, but today, we're interviewing him, as well as our Public Safety Director, Steve Cooper. Welcome, Director Cooper.
Thank you.
And boss, how does it feel to be on the other side of the table today?
It feels great, and thank you.
Okay, we'll get started. In December 2019, culture shifted around the globe as scientists, medical professionals, and the news media rushed to China for the world's first look at the virus COVID-19. Within 3 months, the malicious disease spread to all 7 continents, infecting and taking the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Infuriated protesters seized the streets around the world in May 2020 to mourn the needless murder of Minneapolis resident George Floyd and to demand justice reform relative to historical disparities in death and abuses at the hands of U.S. law enforcement against African Americans. The collective movement that followed both global crises resulted in worldwide scrutiny of private, nonprofit, and public organizations, and a demand for them to take public positions on racial injustice, re-examine equity practices, and prioritize the health and safety of stakeholders. Both events impacted residents, businesses, and government in the city of Oak Park. City Manager Tungate, in response to the pandemic, what have your priorities been over the past 6 months?
Well, thank you for that, Joscelyn. The top priority that all of us have, no matter what department of the city we're talking about, is our residents' safety. And, you can imagine that a global pandemic like the one we're currently in the middle of hit us all pretty hard. And of course, here in the city of Oak Park, we were hit much harder than some of the communities around us even. But throughout, it's been to keep our residents safe. And, we also have to be cognizant of our employees' safety in performing these public services that we've been performing throughout the pandemic. We also have to be mindful of our employee safety and their families, etc. It's really put a spotlight on everything we do, how we do what we do, and what are the best practices out there. And we've had to evaluate virtually everything under the sun here. This is a first in a career situation for me, for sure.
What steps did the city take to maintain fiscal health? That was one of the issues, obviously, with the pandemic, is there had to be some changes in order to keep the city as a going concern. So what did the city do to maintain fiscal health during the shutdown and subsequent reopening of City Hall?
One of the key attributes of any crisis, and this one is really no different, is that when you're going into the crisis or when you're in the thick of it, you don't really know where to set your sights. And so this particular situation is no different from the perspective that it's very difficult, or has been very difficult, for us to put a target on, where our revenues are going to be. And, cities obviously generate the majority of their revenues from property taxes, but there are also fee-for-service activities, permit revenues, etc., that it's very hard to determine where these things are going to be. I mean, let's face it, courts have been operating at a minimum. Recreation activities, the city of Oak Park, we didn't open up many of our recreation activities, and thereby the revenue associated with those activities has in some ways gone by the wayside. So as difficult as it's been to put a target on that, the first thing we did was to say, here's where our best guess is. Here's what we think we're going to lose in terms of revenue opportunities. We've also had some additional costs associated with this. So that was our second thing, is to say, here are the costs that are going to be directly associated with the pandemic. One of those obviously is PPE for public safety. We're very fortunate to have opportunities to seek reimbursement for a lot of those additional costs. We've not seen as much aptitude from both the state and federal government in terms of helping us offset revenue losses. So we're gauging ourselves, preparing ourselves for what that's going to look like now in this, month 6 now or so of this thing. And so as time goes on and this whole thing plays out, we're going to be seeing the real, true financial ramifications from all of this. Fortunately, the other thing I'll mention about the City of Oak Park is we've been very frugal with our funds. We have about a 20% fund balance built up over the last several years. And for us, that's about, $4 million or so set aside in our rainy day fund. So that will also help us get through these difficult times of lost revenues and additional costs, et cetera.
So planning really played a role in making sure that the city was able to continue to operate stably through this. How do you think the pandemic and the shutdown will affect the local economy?
I think it's had a dramatic effect on the local economy, especially for, the large corporate and, retail, restaurants, et cetera. The limitations that have been placed on, in-person activities, whether you're going to a movie theater or a restaurant or even a corporate workplace, any city who has any amount of those entities making up their business community is going to have experienced some downturn. It's going to be interesting to see as we migrate through the presidential election cycle and we get to the vaccine stage of this pandemic, et cetera. It's going to be interesting to see what this new economy is going to look like. We've all heard about tons and tons of restaurants closing up shop, other businesses closing up shop. But it's going to be interesting as, people are still going to go out to eat at some point in the future, let's hope, and still want to purchase goods and frequent, theaters and things like this. So there is going to be that demand, but it's going to be interesting to see what that new world looks like when we move to the next phase of this.
Yes, and economic development. I know department is very concerned about that as well. I believe there's been a couple of campaigns that we've done to encourage residents to actually do business with our local businesses, and hopefully that continues. Director Cooper, how did public safety respond to the pandemic relative to maintaining the health and safety of not only residents, but also public safety officers?
All right, thank you for the question. The Oak Park Public Safety Department, as you know, has the distinct honor of providing, all 3 services. We do police, we do fire, we do EMS. And with those 3, like I said, comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. And you're absolutely correct. What was the things that we were going to do that we were going to do to service our residents as far as keeping them safe as well as keeping our staff safe. For the first thing, like I said, we had the proper personal protective equipment, which was masks, the N95 mask, the rubber gloves, and actually the eyewear. So in order to be able to get to our residents to actually keep themselves safe, we had to make sure we were safe. Mm-hmm. So in doing that, with the proper PPE, that did a great deal to keep our staff safe. During that time, like I said, we had a lot of additional calls for service as it related to medical runs. And we were very cautious as far as how we approached those runs, making sure that, we had our equipment done correctly, and then assisting our residents with personal protection equipment as well, whether it be masks, maybe not to the N95 level, but surgical masks if they were experiencing or displaying some of the COVID signs. Our dispatch team played a really huge role in that as well, because anytime we had a call for medical assistance, our dispatch was actually going through a very intense screening process. They wanted to know particular, were you experiencing, have you been out of the country initially? Have you experienced any fever symptoms? Do you have any of the, what we would consider some of the traditional flu seasons, the cough, the sneezing, the respiratory issues? And then based on that information, we took extra precautions. Now, we also contract with a transport service called Alliance Ambulance, and they are great. They have an advanced level. All of our officers are trained at first responder level, and Alliance Ambulance has paramedics. They have EMTs that are allowed to administer medications and do other things as relates to medical care. So those were the big things, making sure that we had the proper PPE, making sure that we did the appropriate screening when we were receiving those calls. And then once we got to the scene, making sure that we were taking the necessary precautions, that all of our equipment was done correctly, and providing our residents or patients with the proper care as well as the proper equipment as well.
There's talk about a second wave of COVID-19 in the fall, which would coincide with flu season. And that could result in another shelter-in-place order from our governor in an effort to save lives. City Manager Tungate, what is the city administration's contingency plan? Will city services still be provided, and how will we handle voting in the upcoming general election?
Well, let me take a step back. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. But let me take a step back and say this. My heart goes out to all of the people in our community and beyond who have lost loved ones in this crisis. I mean, this has been, I know people who have lost, 4, 5, 6 family members as a result of this. This is real, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a fake disease or anything like that. For some, this is more real than they would ever have imagined. And our thoughts and prayers go out for them. As far as what would happen in the second lockdown, I can't predict the future. I don't know if there's going to be a second lockdown. I think one of my jobs here is to prepare for the worst, unfortunately. If a lockdown were to occur, obviously our governor, who's in charge, would make that decision, and we'd follow that order. But we would still continue to provide the public services that our residents have grown accustomed to. Most notably, public safety. Public safety didn't skip a beat during the first lockdown. For these men and women, it wasn't a vacation, that's for sure. For these men and women, they were putting on their boots and coming into work every day, come hell or high water, and doing what they had to do, putting their lives at risk in some cases for the betterment of our residents. That is a phenomenal thing, in my opinion. And by far and away, people in our department especially, but generally speaking, people have the best intentions. And so if we entered a second lockdown, we would just follow suit with public safety. In terms of public works, we would do everything in our power to keep our employees safe, but still maintain services as much as possible. So I do think we're going to be better prepared. We've made tweaks, we've made improvements, and whatever comes our way, we're going to be ready for it.
And Director Cooper, do you foresee any unusual safety issues should we experience another lockdown?
I do not. Like I said, at the beginning of any situation, it's kind of like, you become accustomed to them in the public safety sector of usually if you get to a scene, the first maybe half hour, maybe depending on what it is a little chaotic. And then you start to gain control. And you slowly started to see that with the pandemic, with protocols coming down from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the Oakland County Medical Control Authority. There were procedures that city manager was putting in place, on a daily basis, which helped us navigate and kind of stabilize. And I think once we got through some of the an issue, I guess, fears or concerns, things kind of leveled out, and it became, unfortunately, a new normal. But yeah, there's always concerns, even as public safety officials. You're right. We don't have the luxury of, staying home or sheltering in place. And all of my men and women have families as well. So we're concerned about the safety of our loved ones, as just like anyone else is.
2 months into the pandemic shutdown, the world reacted to the death of Minneapolis resident George Floyd at the hands of a police officer. There were anti-racism protests around the world, mostly peaceful, some turning violent. A number of Oak Park residents participated in peaceful events here in the city. Director Cooper, why was it important for you to participate in those rallies? Because I do believe you attended both.
I did. And it's funny that you mentioned, like you said, right at the beginning of March, we were in the COVID pandemic. Shortly thereafter, it was time to transition. And to be honest with you, you could detect, an attitude change in some of, society in general. When we were doing the COVID, we were, basically they were carrying us around on their shoulders, figuratively speaking. You were looked at as heroes. And then all of a sudden you had the senseless, death of Mr. George Floyd. And you went from kind of hero to all, in some people's eyes, as villains. I can speak for the entire public safety department when I say that we were horrified when we witnessed what happened to Mr. Floyd. There's not one officer that I have spoken with in this department, as well as other departments in the surrounding communities, as well as other officers throughout the various states, that thought that was senseless. It was nothing short of murder, in my opinion. I think at that point in time, it was very important, critical, to let the community know where we stood as an agency and as a city. The city manager did an outstanding job crafting the message for the city, but from a public safety standpoint, we wanted our residents to know that we stood with them.
Your partners, we are your friends. We stand here with you today. Please know that. God bless you. We love you, and we'll be here.
That we did not look at the protests negatively or as an attack against law enforcement. Our residents were not, and the citizens, not just our residents, but the citizens at large, were not anti-police. They were anti-police brutality. Mm-hmm. And we stood with them with that. And we had two rallies that you mentioned. The first one, we had over 300 residents and members of the community that actually showed up. It was extremely peaceful. We had a second rally a couple days later, where we had well over, I would say 500, maybe in the neighborhood of 700, 750 protesters that came out. I spoke with my staff extensively, and I wanted to make sure that our message was clear to our residents and letting them know that we stood with them. We were not there to antagonize them. We were not there as a show of force, but as part of the community. As a lot of you know, we have an ice cream truck that we've had for several years, and we use that as part of our community engagement tool. Mm-hmm. And once I found out that we actually had the protest plan for Oak Park, one of the first things that I did with my staff was I said, we're going to fill that ice cream truck up to the roof with ice creams, and we will have that truck out there to greet our residents. In addition to the ice cream, we had cold bottled water. It was extremely hot days during the protests. So we wanted to make sure that we had water in there for our residents and for citizens who came out to participate in those rallies. And the third thing that we did is that we had surgical masks. There were several people that attended the rally that may have not had masks, that wanted masks, and we were there to offer that to them. But we wanted to continue the relationship that we had, the positive relationship that we had built throughout the community. And we wanted that to be an olive branch to say, hey, we are here with you. We stand with you. We love our residents. We love you guys. Come over, have an ice cream, have a cold bottle of water. If you need a mask, we'll have a mask for you. If you want to talk about the situation and vent and express yourself, we're more than willing to listen. So we were not there in a militant fashion. We were there similar in a lot of ways that we do with our coffee with the cop, but to have that interaction. You hear a lot of people talk about community policing within the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, since you've had a lot of incidents that have happened throughout the country. I have been, this year is year 30 for me. And I always tell the story that when I hired on in year one, my attitude and my philosophy has not changed. I have always been about the people. I have always been about greeting and embracing the community, working together to solve problems. As I promoted through the ranks of the departments, I had more influence in the decision-making process. And as you gain more influence in the decision-making process, you set the tone for your entire department. And your department will follow your lead. And my lead was that we love our residents. We will embrace them at every step of the way. And that has paid huge dividends. And like I said, you know, community policing is not a program. It's not some gimmick. It's the way you do business on a daily basis. It's how you interact with the community to solve problems. And you want them to know that you are invested. So when you do have troubling times like this, they know where you stand.
Yes.
That was kind of my little philosophy as far as, you know, why it was important to get out here with the protesters. We marched every step of the way with our protesters through our city. And also at the end of the protest, several of them asked if we would come and kneel with them in honor of George Floyd, and to basically say that we stand together against police brutality. And my officers did that, and I could not have been proud of them. And I'll end my little statement with this. At the end of each of those rallies, I was so proud of how our men and women had conducted themselves and the response that we had received from the community. You would have actually thought we were celebrities because they said, hey, we love you guys. We are not talking about you guys. We'd like to take pictures with you. And one more quick story, Joscelyn, before I turn it back over to you. There was a gentleman who currently resides in the city of Oak Park, pretty much all of his life. He said, I went to law school, was the only time that he left Oak Park. And he was at the corner of 9 and Coolidge in the CVS parking lot. And he stood there with a megaphone, and he said, if 99% of the departments would replicate the officers that they have in Oak Park, we would not have these problems throughout our country. He said, why is that? He said, Oak Park takes the time, these officers take the time to know us and to understand us. They know our dialect. They know what we like. They have coffee with a cop at various restaurants. We do Citizens Academy. And then he pointed over in the parking lot at the ice cream truck that we had. And he said, these are the type of things that bring communities together. Mm-hmm. And I could, like I said, again, I could not have been prouder of how we responded in that situation. We did not have one single incident where there was violence. People were there peacefully, and it was more like a picnic to us. So like I said, I'm very proud of the department, very proud that our city manager has given me the authority to lead this department. And you know, I could not do it without his support, which he's been with us every step of the way.
Yes, there's nothing little about your philosophy, Director Cooper, or about those stories. They're important. One more question about that. You did attend the rallies. I happen to know for a fact that they were as wonderful as you described, just from hearing responses from some of the residents and also staff who attended. But what concerns have you heard from our residents, if any? Now, before you answer it, let me just say this too. The fact that our millage for the police, for the public safety department passed so overwhelmingly just recently, this past August, does also show that there's a lot of community support for public safety. And traditionally, public safety in Oak Park has been lauded as one of the best, not just in the state, but probably in the country. But what concerns are you hearing since that incident with Mr. Floyd and others since from residents? Anything specific?
Some of the specific ones, you would be surprised. I am getting emails from residents and actually phone calls and text messages as well. And they want to know, they say, hey, do our officers feel appreciated? Do they feel loved? Do they feel that we actually care about them? And, you know, it just did my heart really well during the times that we're going through, to think that our residents, were taking that approach as opposed to saying, hey, what about my safety? Am I safe here in Oak Park as far as, public safety officers policing? Have you guys taken an anti-community approach? Are you withdrawing yourselves from the community? But it was quite the opposite. And I had to respond to our residents. And like I said, I'm emailing and text messaging, and I'm making phone calls on a daily basis. And I said, we absolutely feel love. That gives us the strength and the encouragement to go out here and do what we do on a daily basis. Our kitchen, it's not like we need to eat, but if you come to our kitchen on any particular day where residents are dropping off treats just to show their love and sending cards, it just reinforces that. You mentioned the millage that just passed. And you're correct. There's a lot of talk throughout, various portions of society about defunding the police. And this has been totally the opposite. This came right in the thick of that. And our millage passed with well over 70% of our residents in approval for that.
Right.
And that says a lot about our residents. And I like to say I think that says a lot about the services that we provide to our residents on a daily basis. I try and make it a point to be out in the community routinely. I'm a little hurt right now because I can't get out as much as you would want to during the COVID season. We're starting to pick back up, but you miss that intimate interaction, that face-to-face with the people that you serve. Like I said, I've been here 30 years, and I guarantee you I could do another 30 years, with my eyes closed. It's a wonderful community. It's a very diverse community, and you couldn't ask for a better group of men and women to provide a service to. And we try and do our best to provide that service at the highest level.
Yes. City Manager Tungate, you've taken a position on behalf of the city's administration about racial injustice in Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement. You actually issued a statement around the George Floyd murder that was very powerful. Could you please share your view?
I speak with Director Cooper very often about some of the issues we're talking about here today, and he and I are lockstep. To me, from a personal perspective, the George Floyd situation was heinous. It's hard to watch. As another human being, it's hard to watch. There are, unfortunately, it appears to me, there are some bad eggs out there who give great departments like ours a bad name for some. That is not representative. The conduct of that officer and those officers in Minneapolis is not representative of our department. My views on racial disparity, and especially as it relates to the police, I'm a white male, so for me, I can't possibly understand what it's like to be treated with such indignity out in society. But my approach to all of it is, we can sit down and we can listen to each other, and we can try to be a better nation, better society, better people. If we're not willing to listen to each other and hear each other out, I think that's the true tragedy of all of this. I think we have, unfortunately, a lot of folks have joined sides on various issues, whether it be on police brutality or other issues. And by doing that, we've not taken the opportunity to listen to each other. And yeah, it's difficult to listen to each other in a global pandemic, but there's other ways to do that. Pick up the phone, listen to people, listen to what they have to say. I can assure you here in the city of Oak Park, as the director said about the Department of Public Safety, I can say this about all the departments of the city government. This is a city government who is going to listen, and we are going to hear what our residents and others have to say. And where there are places we can make improvements or we can be more adept, we are going to make those. Our goal here is to be as public service minded as possible, and most importantly, to be as good a human beings as possible and treat each other with dignity and respect that they deserve.
Yes, that's exactly what your statement did. Absolutely support that. And I want to come back to something here. I do understand, City Manager Tungate, that the city does listen, but you've done some other things that have been consistent even before this attention. Director Cooper, what practices and protocols already exist to ensure fairness in policing in Oak Park?
Yes, we have several policies, and we call those general orders that dictate and guide our behavior on any particular day. And I can tell you in the Oak Park Department of Public Safety, I believe there's 126 general orders, and then we have another set of rules and regulations that govern how we act and conduct ourselves. One of the ones that I think is most applicable during this time is our general order, which is called fair and impartial policing. And it means when you start hearing those terms, fair and impartial, what does that mean to the average citizen? It means just that. You are not to go out here and make decisions based on someone's race, their national origin, their ethnic background, their gender, religious, their sexual orientation, age, so on and so forth. You are to look strictly at the situation. You are to view that impartially without taking any of those factors into consideration to bias you towards a particular decision and make the correct decision. That has to be one of the core staples that you have in your department. Without that, you leave yourself open for, ad hoc policing. When we start talking about bad officers, and we obviously know that the majority of the officers that go out here and don the shield on a day in and day out basis do it with pride and honor and dignity. And but unfortunately, there are a few, the minority that do not do this. And it's up. No one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And it's our responsibility as the good cops to police each other. Yes, I am my brother's keeper. I do have a responsibility to make sure that my officers are policing in a fair and impartial manner. One of the sections that we've added into our general order as well is the duty to intervene. And that's one that's garnered some national attention. And simply put, a duty to intervene means that if you are at the scene of an incident and you witness one of our officers, meaning Oak Park officers, or if we're at a scene and there are multiple agencies with other officers from surrounding departments, and you see them acting in an inappropriate manner, whether it be using physical force, then you have a duty to intervene. You have a responsibility. That's part of your oath. And if you do not, you will be held accountable. I want all of our officers to know that, and they know that. And this is something that you hate to say that you have to put it in writing. That's something that should be common sense. That should be when you swear and when you raise your right hand and you swear and you take the oath to uphold this office, you should automatically know that. But for those who do not, we have that in there. With the Mr. Floyd case, where he was murdered right there in the streets with the officer, kneeling on his neck for several minutes. And you start talking about different uses of force. And when you start talking about use of force, you can be talking about anything from verbal commands to hands-on, where you're using certain techniques from defensive tactics that you learn. One of the things that we put into our policies is there's a prohibition against chokeholds. We've always had that. Oak Park does not use chokeholds, but we specifically put the language in there to clear up any ambiguity in anyone's mind at any particular point, that chokeholds are not to be used. A chokehold can only be used as a last resort. And when I say a last resort, that's a situation where you're looking to save your life, the life of another, if you had to resort to something of that nature. So, those few things that, when you start talking about police reform and, changing policies and and getting everyone on the same page. You would think that that would be common sense, just a common thread throughout law enforcement throughout the country, but unfortunately, it's not. You have different departments with different professional standards, and they police differently. We have always prided ourselves on being at that topper echelon and being the cream of the crop. And I don't want to, monopolize all of the camera time here, but I would just like to say, again, I have to tip my hat to our city manager. None of this is possible without his support and without his authorization. But when we're out looking to hire officers, we want the best of the best. We are policing in very difficult and challenging times, and it is extremely hard to come across quality candidates. And when you're trying to attract these candidates, you have to make sure that you have the best benefits, some of the best equipment, and some of the best officers that are out there to demonstrate, why would you want to come and be a Oak Park public safety officer? Mm-hmm. Like I said, I have been here 30 years. And since my tenure as the director here, which has been since 2012 when the city manager came aboard, one of my top priorities has been to diversify the department more. Mm-hmm. We are, I'll tell you this, if you want to look at other departments similar to Oak Parks in this suburban communities, we are leaps and bounds ahead of other departments as far as the diversity. But we're not where we want to be. We're continually looking to diversify the department. And I know, and the boss always reminds the entire staff, when we're talking about diversity, sure, one of the first things that you think about is, okay, race, oh, we need more Black officers or female or Hispanics. But diversity is more than that. It's a mindset. And I talk to my officers and I say, I have some that are extremely great at tactics, they want to be SWAT guys. I have others that are very good at, dealing with the really young elementary school kids. I have some that are excel with the elderly. And I say, when you're looking to formulate a department, you need a bouquet of flowers. But I don't just need one group of one particular person. I need a bouquet. So I need to bring all of those different type of officers together to form a department to service the community. And, we're doing a really good job at that. Obviously, there's still work to be done. And we'll continue to do that. Customer service is number one. And like I said, I have to blow the boss's horn again on that. From the day he stepped in this office, that was one thing that he had always talked about, customer service. And I could not agree with him more. If you want to really get me upset, you treat one of my residents or someone who comes in, a citizen of this community, inappropriately. And I guarantee you, you won't be here very long. Internal communication as well as external communication and customer service is a key. So like I said, I've tried to pride myself on that, and I want that to matriculate down through the ranks. And I think it has to a great degree. But, like I said, you can't rest on your laurels. There's still a lot of work to be done. I think we do a really good job at that, and we'll continue those efforts.
That's good. Okay. And City Manager Tungate, what else are you committed to doing to ensure a culture of inclusion and equity, not just in Oak Park's Public Safety Department, but in the city administration?
Well, some solid steps that have been taken in the last 8 years include we've completely revamped our human resources function. In fact, we didn't have a legitimate human resources function prior to 2012. We have since completely revamped the way that we hire individuals. The director talked a little bit about how we're doing outreach in terms of hiring individuals in our public safety department. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is we're trying to do that in every corner of our government. We want to be inclusive. We recognize, as the director mentioned this as well, he's absolutely right. We recognize that picking candidates from a more diverse pool of candidates, whether that be age diversity, gender diversity, racial diversity, whatever it may be, is a strategic advantage for the city government. Our philosophy is that the more diverse the people sitting around a table trying to solve complex issues and problems are, generally speaking, the better the result will be. And that's because those people with more diverse backgrounds, etc., can draw from experiences and education and family issues, whatever it may be, that otherwise may not be present. It is actually it's the right thing to do, but it's also a strategic advantage for the city government, and in turn, produces better results, better public service results for our residents.
City Manager Tungate, you have been very gracious to relinquish your chair to me to host this special segment of your show, Meeting with the Manager. So, of course, you need to have the last word, and we want to hear from you. So, in spite of, or maybe even because of, these extremely challenging times we're in right now, what's the main message you want the greater Oak Park community to take away from this interview today?
Well, first and foremost, I want everybody to know that there will be light at the end of the tunnel, whether it's the pandemic or some of the social upheaval in our society. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. I hope that the events that have taken place over the last 6 months lead us to becoming a better nation, a better city, and most importantly, better people. And I hope out of all of this, we've learned and we've grown to respect each other more, listen to each other more, focus on improving our society, being able to see that you may have implicit bias in your life that you may not be as aware of as you think you are, is a very intelligent human thing. People should, it's part of being emotionally intelligent. And I think hopefully people gain a better understanding of that. There are always going to be those that try to drag this into the mud. And I'm hoping that through this, from the ashes, we rise again and we're a light in the shadow after all this is said and done. And I think we will be. I know I have heard from a lot of people who have expressed some hopelessness to me. And quite honestly, times like this, I think, require stability. I think they require inspirational leadership. And, I'm not Franklin Roosevelt. I'm not Martin Luther King. None of us are. But I hope through me and Director Cooper and all the great staff we have here at the city, people will see inspiration and they'll feel that from us. And, that may inspire them to continue on in difficult times.
Well put. City Manager Erik Tungate and Director Steve Cooper, thank you for your time and your honesty today, your authenticity. I appreciate you. And boss, the chair is yours again.
Thank you.
Thank you.